But it's really true. He's a great representative, great advocate for this town, and people probably come and tell you that, but it really is true in Tom's case, and I think you're lucky to have him up there. Capitol is a place that really runs on a relatively small number of people who really work hard, focus on issues that matter and become expert in them and really make a difference. And Tom is one of those legislators, and I just want to make sure I recognize him as that type of a leader in Hartford. My name's Cam Staples. I'm a state representative from New Haven. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about my background, not too much. I'm happy to take questions. I've been there 18 years, so I don't want to tell you everything. But I'd like to give you some background on what I've done and what my public service career has been about, and then let you know why I'm running for Attorney General and hope to have your support. I first began in politics in 1986, running for the New Haven Democratic Town Committee. Probably like your town committee, it means a lot to be on the town committee in New Haven. It's an elective office. I had to slug it out with a few other people, and it was a great honor to get elected to the town committee and start working in local politics. About a year later, the alderman from my district decided to sail around the world, and so I ran for the Board of Aldermen in New Haven and was elected to serve a few more terms. So I served 5 years in the Board of Aldermen. That's a great education in politics. I will never forget my 5 years that seemed like 25 years on the New Haven Board of Aldermen. We have 30 aldermen, each of whom represent about 4,000 people, and the Board of Aldermen represents the city almost exactly. When you have districts that small, I mean, ethnically and racially and age, I mean, it was really a collection of people that is quite reflective of the city, and it was a great place to serve and to learn politics. In my last year there, I was the majority leader of the board, and then had the opportunity to run for the state legislature in 1992. One of the reasons I ran was my concern about the quality of public education. I had seen a lot in the New Haven school system. I didn't have children at that time, but was very concerned about how some schools were excellent and everybody wanted to get into those, and some schools were not good at all. And it really was, to me, a tragedy that there were so many kids who were not learning, and there were kids in many of our schools that at 4th grade where only 4% were achieving mastery in the 4th grade mastery test in reading. And you have that and you just don't succeed in life. There are studies after studies that show if you can't read by 4th grade, your odds of graduating from high school, getting a good job, being a success in life diminish dramatically. So I was very motivated to run and to try to do something about the quality of schools in the city of New Haven. I was fortunate enough to become the vice chair of the Education Committee in my first term, and then the chairman in my second term, and I served for 8 years as chairman of the Education Committee. And it was a real passion of mine. It still is in many ways, although I'm no longer chair of that committee. But I really believe that's about the most important thing you can do in public service to improve the quality of life in a community, is to have good quality schools. I co-sponsored bills that established early childhood education programs for 3- and 4-year-olds to have preschool, because that's been shown to have a tremendous impact on children's ability to learn. Early reading intervention programs, and then when Sheffers' versus O'Neill decision came down, spent a lot of time on inter-district programs and trying to expand opportunities for kids to get access to better schools. I tell you that not because education is central to the role of the Attorney General, but because, in my view, when you look at somebody who's running for a job like this, you really ought to know what makes them go. You ought to know what they're passionate about. You ought to know why they're in public service, what matters to them, what issues are of concern to them, because I think that tells you a lot about the way they'll be in any office. And for me, making sure that people have access to basic opportunities and can succeed in life, and especially people who start out without the opportunities that many of us have had, that's the major role, I think, of government. And I think in the Attorney General's office, it's a major role to make sure that people's rights and opportunities are protected. After I left the Education Committee, I chaired the Finance Committee, where I still sit. Of course, we've been involved in the budget turmoil in the last several years, but other than that, I've worked on the bonding side, funding higher education, which I believe very strongly in. The community colleges, the state university system, and obviously the University of Connecticut have been really rebuilt over the last several years. And I was very involved, particularly in the state university and community college funding effort. Lastly, in that committee, the transportation infrastructure of the state About 5 years ago, the legislature authorized a very substantial mass transit reinvestment. It's taken a long time for this administration to get its act together to get even the New Haven-Springfield line into the pipeline, but I think that when that's fully implemented, that's going to be critical to our economic success. I think we're so far behind states that are far less able than we are in the area of mass transit. We have the strange notion that we're too spread out. Well, there are cities the size of Connecticut. I mean, you go to Phoenix or you go to some cities in the West where they have mass transit from the center all the way out. It's not difficult, and when we're really painfully behind the 8 ball, I think, in our mass transit. Those are some of the major things I've done in the last 18 years, are the issues that I've spent my time on as a member of the legislature. At the same time, I was practicing law in New Haven, and I've been there about 20 years. I've practiced the last 5 in the law firm that I'm a partner of. 11 years before that, I was the general counsel of a medical association, and then about 5 years before that, a lawyer in a Hartford law firm. My practice focuses mostly on healthcare. I represent doctors and their patients in their efforts to get treatments approved and authorized by insurance companies. That is the lion's share of what I do now. I have had about 200 to 250 cases in the last several years that I've taken on representing doctors and patients against insurers to get paid, and it's become a specialty of mine, and it's a very big interest of mine. And again, it's an area where I think people really need to be sure that they have access to good quality health care and that the system treats them fairly. And sometimes the system does not treat them fairly. As Attorney General, that's to me a vital area that I would focus on. Healthcare reform is still being debated. Who knows what will happen in Washington, but I think access to health care, the affordability of health care will continue to be a dominant issue. Premiums are going up, through the roof. There are a lot of issues around health care, and I'm not saying it's the insurer's fault. There are an awful lot of issues around why we don't have good quality health care for everyone. It's something I know something about, and I think it's a vital function of the Attorney General's office. I want to tell you that I'm running only for one office. I'm not exploring. We've read a lot about explorations. I understand why people explore, but I'm not exploring. I formed a candidate committee, and I also am participating in the public finance system, God willing that there is a public finance system in the next couple of months. And I'm doing that because, for a couple of reasons. One, I believe in public financing. I voted for it, and I think if there's any office where you want to make sure there's no special interest influence in picking the office holder, it's the state's lawyer. I mean, that lawyer has to serve your interests, and you have to be very certain that they're elected by you. So I believe in that. And I also think it's important to be consistent. I mean, if you vote for something and you say support it, you ought to participate in it. When you run for an office, you ought to make a decision to run for that office. You ought to say, I'm not running for state rep again. I'm not holding out that opportunity. I've let the people know in my town that they can contest that seat. And I've chosen one office that I'd like to serve in for as long as people will elect me. You shouldn't run for Attorney General unless you're willing to serve there, I think, long enough to master the job, to be very effective at it, and to have the ability to direct the state's resources in places that will make a difference in people's lives. Dick Blumenthal served there for 20 years, and it's not because he didn't have other options. First of all, he was good at it, but secondly, I think he recognized that to be a really good Attorney General, you've got to spend some time at it. It's not something you learn the first day you walk in. There are a couple hundred lawyers there who've been doing things for a very long time and are very expert, and you've got to command their respect, and you've got to focus on the issues that matter most to people. For me,